In today's vlog, I want to talk about God. Now, don't run away on me. Hear me out. So, I'm an individual who's explored many different types of spiritualities and religions and just different types of thoughts about how the universe works. I like science. I like all these different paths. They're fascinating. And I mostly learn about them through reading articles online, books, listening to videos, or just talking to some actual other practitioners of varying types of religious and spiritual activities. And I've come to find out that over the years, people have a very, very different opinion on what they consider to be the universe, existence, and if they do use the term God, what they actually mean when they use that word. I was raised Roman Catholic, and when I was younger, probably close to 30 years ago at this point, if not longer, 95, right around 1995, I decided, I was like, this path isn't really for me. I'm going to start looking elsewhere. And I've been looking ever since. And then I've just decided, I'm going to have my own personal relationship with what I like to call divinity. Other people would use the term God. Some would use the term God. And at first, when I started exploring some of the polytheistic neo-pagan paths, I got a very bad taste in my mouth when it came to monotheistic faiths. I'll be honest. And I think a lot of people that go that route have a tendency to be jaded towards some of the mainstream religions, which is why they look elsewhere. But something I've come to find out, especially recently in the last couple of years, I started talking with other individuals, even people who are monotheistic, and started having conversations like, let's agree to disagree and let's just talk. And some people actually end up having a view very similar to how some neo-pagans view it. Now, don't run away from the video and turn it off, whether you're neo-pagan or some sort of monotheistic Abrahamic faith. It doesn't really matter. Hear me out for a second. It seems like people are describing God differently than how he was originally envisioned if you go back through Christianity. I'm going to mention Christianity because I live in the United States. I was raised Roman Catholic. I have the most experience with that as far as the monotheistic faiths go. Even though I've had some exposure to other bits, I've spent the most time there. So when I was younger, I was always given the impression that God is a man, God is the Father, there's only one God, and there always has been one God. But I don't know if that's the case based upon talking to some other people that are even monotheistic or listening to other people speak about it. Talking about some YouTube videos. There's this guy, Cliff, I can't remember his last name. Now, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of his videos. I feel like he sometimes will twist things to fit his point. Like he'll talk rational and logical, and then he just completely twists things and flips it on his head. And no matter what you say, he tries to spin it around because the view as he views it through his religion is the only way. And sometimes the logic is lost as he's spinning back. Not always, but sometimes. But what stood out to me is there is a woman who was asking about God's gender. You can look it up. It's here on YouTube. And he had mentioned basically God is everything. God is not necessarily just God the Father. It's just there's no neuter term for referring to God, and God's a personal being, so you wouldn't call God it. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was very interesting. Apparently, Charlie Kirk, I like most of his videos. Some of his videos are kind of hit and miss too. But he was also talking about, too, the idea that God can be a woman. God is like literally all things. So it's like, wait a minute. A lot of this is starting to sound very close to a lot of the New Age neo-pagan viewpoints. Not all of them. Not everybody agrees. This is the case. That's why we're talking about this stuff, getting people thinking. I'm not trying to dictate to you. I'm just trying to share my thoughts in these vlogs and just kind of ramble on like, this is what's going through my head. And these are some of the conversations that I've had. But it's like looking at the way that some neo-pagans, some will view the universe. There's this divine essence in a way. There's this cosmic force, this energy, and the gods are aspects of this greater whole. Like all of the gods are connected. So when you're talking to a specific deity, god or goddess with a specific name, you're trying to tap into that specific aspect, which is why some neo-pagans will also kind of take names of deities and kind of use them universally, or they'll say this deity and this pantheon for this culture is almost the same as this deity and this pantheon in this culture, almost as if the people in the world are accessing different aspects of the universe. They're just calling it by a different name. And it seems like some monotheistic Christians use the word God that way. Some of the people I've talked to will use the term God, but they don't have a finite definition of what God is. They'll even use other words, like you'll hear the Freemasons will say the great architect. There's some people who call it the creator. I know people who call God the creator. I personally say the divine. I like to use the word divinity, the divine. And the divine refers to all and no pantheons at the same time. And it's something that permeates us, that we are literally alive because of the spark of the divine. It's beyond our comprehension, which seems to parallel some people's view on God. And I thought that was fascinating. I also think it's interesting, too, that if we look back at the origin of Christianity, I would almost argue, and I think this is where people get tied up on the details. See, a lot of people like to throw up when they insult paganism. They try to throw up pre-Christian practices that are very barbaric. And it's like, well, the counterpoint to that is pre-modern practices of Christianity were also very barbaric. And even today, some people weaponize it. Not everybody, but some people weaponize it today. But I think we need to look at the individual, how they practice, and the type of person they are, versus focusing so much on the group that they come from. Wanted to precursor that before we jump into this. Something I'll point out, and if you are of a monotheistic faith or any of the faiths I'm about to mention, this is not intended to be an insult. So hear me out. Listen to the full thing before you jump into the comments with your opinion, your counterpoint. I genuinely feel like original Christianity is pretty much the exact same thing as Islam and Judaism. It comes from the same spot in the world. We have the original Bible, and then we have all of the different texts that are used in Judaism, like the Torah. I don't know all of them. There's a couple books and stuff that they use in the Jewish faith. And then in Islam, like the Quran and stuff, it's all from that same region. It has the same Holy Land. And the original God of the Christians was the Jewish God. The original Bible is written in Hebrew and Aramaic. It has cultural influences from those lands. Jesus, whose name would have been Yeshua ben Yosef, not Jesus. Jesus is like a modernization of the name. It could actually technically also be Josh, apparently, according to some of the things that I've read, would have been Middle Eastern. He would have been over there. He would have been in modern day Palestine or Israel today. That's the region that comes from. So the writings in that book are going to be influenced heavily by that culture. I don't think most people today picture someone from the Middle East when they think of Jesus. In fact, a lot of the imagery that I saw growing up had him as being paled skin with blue eyes and dark brown hair. And he looked more like he would have been closer somewhere around like Anglo-Saxon type of an area, or even English, and it's in the depictions of him. So it's like we're talking about reinventing. That's just one aspect of it alone. Not to mention the fact, too, that God has a name in their Bible, and it's Yahweh. I know there's different ways to pronounce it. Apparently, it's supposed to sound like a breath. Because again, I researched, I looked into this. Not that I'm an expert, but I looked into this. But there's an actual name associated with it. And then we can argue about details in the Bible, but that's not the point of this. The point is, there's a specific name. So God is a title. And apparently in the Quran, they don't use God's name. If I understand it correctly, they call him Allah, which means the High One. So again, there's these titles used to be associated with this. So people started using God as it spread. Now, I don't want to talk about the history and arguments over how Christianity got into a whole bunch of different nations, but what I will point out is it seems like if you look at the different cultures that practice Christianity, they blended it with their local cultures. The way that someone does Christianity in the United States, we have different denominations. Even within the same denomination, there's some variances depending on what state they're from. Now, if you look at the way they do it in Germany, or Iceland, or Ireland, or England, there's going to be some variances on the way that they do Christianity. Jump over to Japan or China. There's some variances, and there's cultural influences into those. So when people use the term God today, I think they're applying their own viewpoint on their own relationship with this greater being. And I'm wondering if more of the religions don't actually have more similarities or are closer together in their beliefs and what they're calling God, creator, the architect, divinity, maybe they're all viewing it in a very similar fashion, and we're actually splitting hairs over nothing. To think about all the different people that get so mad because they're of a monotheistic faith and they have someone over here who says that they're a pagan and they're saying gods, or they're referring to a specific god or a goddess as they're talking, and they're getting so mad, no, there's only one God. But who are you to dictate what God is or what God's capable of? Is God not beyond our comprehension? Just because we don't understand what's happening without the world and the universe and doesn't match our own personal view doesn't mean it's not still present. So who's to say, if this is an all-powerful, omniscient being that's everywhere, who's to say each individual can't have their own relationship with it, their own communication with it, their own understanding of it? And it would appear in different symbology to that individual. If everything is God's creation, according to monotheistic faiths, then literally we're here. But everyone's so convinced that we're led astray, and you have to be guided by some sort of a book or a teacher or a priest or a religious group like a church to tell you and keep you away from what's good and what's evil, versus God being powerful enough to tell you yourself for your own personal relationship with it. In fact, apparently there's this Gnostic beliefs, this personal relationship with God, and it was prevalent through different types of spiritualities, including stuff like Hermeticism, which predates Christianity, that has its own personal relationship with divinity. So it's interesting to think about, because as I've been talking to people, their own interpretation on what they're calling God seems to vary so greatly. People hear God and instantly turn off putting their dukes up. A lot of people get very, especially if they're religious. If they're mild religious, they might, but really religious people have a tendency to put their back up if you question or push against God. You even see this in individuals who practice Hinduism. I've worked with individuals from India who are here on a green card because of the type of job that I do, and a lot of them will just say God, but then they start talking about all their different gods and goddesses. And one person actually pointed out to me, like, well, we don't want to say anything else than God because we get targeted if we do. So they use it almost as a defense. Some of them, I can't speak for everyone, because again, everyone does it in their own way. So I'm wondering if it's not worth getting upset so much anymore for anyone out there about what people are referring to what created us. If they use the term God, which is a title, because who are we to understand what it is that created us? Whether you be neo-pagan, atheist, or Christian. And even atheism takes it in different directions, because sometimes there's atheists who say that there could be something, but they don't know what it is. And then there's atheists who says, we just don't know anything, I'm not even going to try, or it's just all BS. There's so many different views, and it's absolutely wild and amazing. But I'm one of those individuals who like to hear those different views, think about it, contemplate it, and have a conversation. So if you want to join that conversation, put your comments below. Do you use the term God? And if you do, what does it mean to you? There's no wrong answer here. Just try to avoid fighting over it. Just share your experience, if you use the term God. Because again, neo-pagans, polytheists, yeah, they believe in multiple gods and goddesses. So they might only use the word God as referring to one of the many beings they believe in. But then there might be individuals who actually believe in a pantheon, a polytheistic viewpoint, animistic viewpoint, whatever, and they still use the term God because it's easier. But when they view God, they have a very distinct view that it's more of a universal spiritual energy versus being a singular masculine deity. So anyway, thanks for watching and listening to me ramble on. This is probably a longer video, but yeah, I'm on a roll. I'll catch you in the next one.